Hello, welcome to Ray-ality TV. I'm Raymond Bakari, and today I'm joined by Providence City Council President, who represents Ward 7 in the city, City Council President John Igliozzi. Council President Igliozzi, how are you today?
All right. How you doing, Raymond? And thank you for having me on.
I'm doing great, and thank you for coming on the show. It's a pleasure of mine to have you on. Just diving right into it here, this is a first question I generally ask whenever I ask elected officials about their passions and origins of politics. What made you want to get into politics?
Oh, it's been a family tradition for decades, for almost 100 years. So it's the idea of actually, and it's also on basically the promotion of the 3 R's: personal responsibility, family responsibility, and then community responsibility. And so being responsible for our community and helping it and representing it is a passion of my family and part of our credo, trying to help others who need help.
And you were chairman of the Finance Committee for over a decade before becoming council president. And one of the biggest issues facing the city currently is our pension system. And you would have more experience than anybody currently in city government looking at ways to fix this. How can the city finally be able to fix this looming issue that could put the city in risk of receivership if it continues the way it is right now?
Okay, so first of all, the city it's not going to go into receivership or bankruptcy. That process is such a long, laborious process. There's like 20 steps before you can even get there. So that's really not in the realm of real possibility. Let's talk about the pension system. The unfunded liability took years in the making, 10 plus 20 years in the making. Okay, so presently, how you have to look at it, we have approximately $385 million in our pension account. That money is invested in stocks and bonds and in American stock market and portfolio. And our rate of return for the past 20 plus years has been an average of about 8%. So we're doing a really good job on investing those funds. The issue is that we are what they call 22% funded. We should have $1.5 billion in the account, right? So we're $1.2 billion unfunded. So that unfunded liability creates, for lack of a better term, our annual mortgage payments, okay? Right now it's $92 million this year and goes up every year 5% guaranteed, which means it becomes very strenuous and it becomes taxing on the city's ability to grow and to expand its financial base because it has this massive debt to pay for over the next 25 years. So, and I equate it to like a bad mortgage, right? You have a bad mortgage, the interest rates are really high, it's really bad. So one of the things that we talked about, first of all, is over the years, we've done a lot of different pension reform aspects to it. We've gone to court, we've got concessions, we get employees to pay a little more into the system. We reformed the pension loan program, now it makes money. So we've done a lot of different things. We also created one of the first things I did was a pension reform package way back when, in which we wrenched control of the investment of the portfolio from the unions to a professional investment firm. Back then, it was being invested all over the place. It wasn't performing. Now it's performing like it should. So let's talk about how we deal with the unfunded portion, which is about $1.2 billion. That there is no silver bullet. It's not going to go away in a year or two. It's going to be a 25-year conversation. So you have to plan today to protect the future for tomorrow. One way we can do it is this, and people are talking about this thing called a pension obligation bond. Right? Now, it's not the first time we spoke about this in the city of Providence, but the reason why it's different today versus the last 2 times we've spoken about it in decades in the past was that the terms are different. Back then, you could only get a variable rate loan, pension obligation bond. Today, you can get a fixed rate. That's new. Back then, you couldn't refinance it. Today, you can refinance it. Also, so those 2 elements have drastically changed the conversation where you can get a fixed rate and then also can refinance it if rates get better. Third thing that's what makes this appealing is that unfortunately, COVID, which has brought a lot of misery to people, and a lot of harm to all of us, health-wise and economically. There's one thing that has occurred, which is interest rates. The federal interest rate is pretty much basically zero. It's 0.25%. So if we take out a pension obligation bond, we potentially could get a fixed rate of about 2.5% for the next 25 years. So what you get it, so we take out a loan for the sake of compensation for $700 million approximately at a fixed rate of 2.5%, and our annual rate of return is 8%. So therefore, you get an influx of that 700 million added to the almost 400 million. Now you have over $1 billion being funded into the system. So with that rate of return on $1 billion, we can pay back our pension obligation bond in 25 years at a fixed rate. At the same time, increase the amount of money we generate to pay our pensioners, and then take the financial burden off the taxpayer. So what it does is, if we do a pension obligation bond, it takes an escalated mortgage payment. Like I mentioned, Eric, mentioned before, the analogy is an escalated mortgage payment going up 5% every year, right? And it takes that payment and it does this. It flattens it out. It's still a high number, but now you have a fixed mortgage payment for 25 years versus an escalated mortgage payment for 25 years. So it doesn't solve it in a year. It's an issue where it can solve it in 25 years. Now, if we do nothing at all that means is the city will continue to have the financial strain based because of the pension problem, because of the continually escalated curves. So that's a viable solution that only is viable today because interest rates are zero. Now, if interest rates are 6, 7%, we would not be talking about that because it's not financially advantageous. So that's an example. Another thing, that's a great, so that's an opportunity. Another thing we can do, and we have been trying to do, is that all new hires, anybody who gets hired into the city government, will pay more into the pension system, get less from the system, and take longer to get it. So what you do is that also helps the system. You get new dollars coming into it. If you float the pension obligation bond, now you have a big chunk of money into the system, and then you flatten the annual payment for the next 25 years, and you take off the financial stress. So those are two potential answers to this pension quagmire.
And there's another one that I usually bring up on the show when we talk about the pension system, and I've gotten a few different answers. And given your experience in the city government, I'm curious how possible this is and what the likelihood of having it help fix the problem could be. So it was something that Cranston did years ago, where the new employees would receive an individual IRA that they would own themselves, and get out of the pension business. Is that possible to do in Providence, and how much would it help?
Well, let's flesh that out. The problem with that scenario in Providence is it doesn't address the unfunded pension liability. You still have that issue, and you still have to have that pension obligation for those the people in the system and the pensioners who are receiving it. What happens there is now you don't have any new money going into the system to be reinvested. So then it would actually, if we did that, it has the potential to escalate the problem quicker, because now all the new hires aren't getting money into the system to be invested into the pension account to pay for the pensioners. Now, if you close, they're talking about closing the system. That's what they're talking about. You close the system, well, then you actually have to close it, but then you also have to fully fund it. You have to come up with the 1.2 billion and put it in the account. So it doesn't work unless you solve the unfunded pension liability problem first. And if you solve that, if I mentioned I gave you two possible solutions, that solves it, and then also makes it a robust system that can go on in the future. The system does work. The issue is that it just was mismanaged for many years. That's why it's not working the way it should. So closing the system at this time would not be viable, because it actually would just accelerate the financial problem.
And looking at the unfunded obligation, it takes a chunk out of our annual budget every year. And one issue that has been talked about on this show that we could possibly use money from, if we can get the money, is making Brown University and PC pay their fair share in taxes. They take up a large chunk of the land. And an analogy that I had, that, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but wouldn't the city have the advantage on making Brown and PC pay their fair shares? Because what are the colleges going to do? Threaten to leave the city? That would hurt them, and then we get the land back, and you can use it for businesses and housing. But overall, the question for this is, what's stopping Brown and PC from finally being able to pay their fair share in taxes?
Well, I mean, let's talk about that. First of all, you got to add also Rhode Island College and URI because they have a footprint in the city of Providence. And then you're talking about other nonprofits. First of all, it's got to do with tax law and the regular law, right? At this time, they all have non-taxable status. So you have to now somehow um, remove that non-taxable status from a nonprofit. Well, that's something the city of Providence doesn't have the unilateral authority. Maybe Congress can do it, maybe the state house, but city of Providence could not do that.
Not to interrupt, but I think Councilman Salvatore had mentioned that if the state would let them, is there validity to that? That it's up to the state?
There's a potential, but I think we're talking about tax law, and remember their nonprofit status comes from the federal government, comes from the king, all these different documents, federal documents, state documents. So there's not an easy answer just saying wave that away. Now, paying their fair share, it's always, I love it. It's always a good idea. I think what it comes down to is that you have to work with them to be a good neighbor, right? It's just not those entities that are growing in the city of Providence. Our hospitals have taken up our footprint. When I began as a city council person, it was basically mid 30% of property that was off the tax rolls. Now it's mid 40s, like 47% off the tax rolls, and it grew because of both schools and hospitals. So, and all the other nonprofit organizations that have what do you call it, set up shop in Providence. So there's a lot of things that are attributed to that problem. Now, getting them to pay their fair share is about having a good conversation. I think one of the issues is that we have to resign the fact that the city of Providence is a college town now. We're a college medical town. That's what we are. One time we were a great industrial town back in the turn of the century. Then we were a financial district and a manufacturing district, but we're not. We're a college and medical town. So we need to, instead of being, the problem is over the years we've been adversarial with our nonprofit partners. We need to become advocates together, where we need to design ways in which they can create their growth, which does spin off new jobs and economics, but also how it can benefit the city and protect its tax base. So what we need to do today, which we haven't done in many years, is actually have an advocacy dialogue with all those entities and talk about how to secure and stabilize the city's tax base, how they can help us do that, whether it's through monetary effort or whether it's through legislative effort, but they need to become a partner in this conversation. And I think that's the first step. And the next step is what can they cannot, what they can do, what they can't do. And it's a combination, it's a relationship. It's not going anywhere. You just said yourself, they're not going to pick up and leave, of course not. But neither is the city of Providence, right? So neither the people. So we need to have a collaborative conversation. Walking into a negotiation with a blunt instrument, you usually don't get any results. It's just that people are blunt. But walking into negotiations with maybe some honey and some sugar and conversation, maybe all of us can have a good conversation and we have something sweet that we can produce together, right? So that's gonna be the approach the city has to take. And we need to get them more involved in city government so they have a greater stake, more involvement with us, and they're more embedded with us and understand that the way the city goes, they go. Because remember now, all our amenities that we provide for these institutions benefits these institutions so they can grow, right? So we have a lot to offer. They have a lot to offer. We need to begin the dialogue and have a conversation how we can mutually grow together, but not at our expenses or detriment, but in a positive fashion.
Are there any concerns that this problem could get bigger, however, because they keep Brown keeps expanding and, our budget situation, we do have the surplus of the federal money, but, there's a lot of issues like housing, property taxes going up because to make up for all these all this spending. Are there any concern that this could get worse if the city doesn't buck up now and, have this tough conversation?
Let's talk about, well, for the past 4 years, we haven't raised taxes, which is a good thing. Actually, the past, I think, almost 7 years now. So the city's been pretty stable on its issuing its tax bills. That's the first thing. The second thing is, of course, we have a concern as all these nonprofits buy up city property in the city, taking it off the tax rolls. So how we can address that is a couple of things. One, we could start creating tougher zoning where we can limit that type of expansion. So there's ways to do that. And creating school zones and places like that where how far you can move, what you can do. And yes, it does have an impact on the city's budget, city's ability to raise taxes, but also the city has to also be honest with itself. I mean, the city subsidizes a lot of organizations. I mean, to millions and millions of dollars, at the taxpayer's detriment. And I don't want to get into those organizations because every organization is great. Every organization is the best thing. It's rainbows and unicorns. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. But the issue is that it's also how the city uses its present tax dollars, right? And what we do is we've diluted the tax dollars that we do get. Instead of doing the basic things, providing clean streets and parks and playgrounds and better schools, we end up diluting it with subsidizing all these other types of organizations, which is great. All wonderful. I don't want to go down the laundry list. But we also need to go into this conversation being honest, where we need to look at our own budget, address where we are. Let's talk about luxury items in our budget. And then when we go to these nonprofits, non-taxable, say, listen, we're doing our part. We need to do your part. We need to start working together. And yes, as it grows, as non-taxable property grows, it is a cause for alarm. And people should be concerned about it because what happens in the city has a ripple effect throughout the rest of the state. And so we need to get the rest of the state to care about the city again. We need to understand that how the city goes, the state goes. How our school system goes, the state goes. We're actually one big system. People don't realize it. And the city, city's like the heart. And then, all the blood veins flow out to the other cities and towns. The city has to stay healthy. So the second dialogue we also have to begin is with our other neighboring cities and towns, and getting them and getting them to buy into, I should say, the idea that the city, we can't do it alone. We need to do it together, and maybe work in a more collaborative way. We can then maybe make a healthier city, which will create a healthier state.
And some of that stuff you'd mentioned towards the answer is actually what's going to be the mayor's responsibility come January 2023. We're going to have a new mayor after this 2022 mayoral election. And usually the council president is like the favorite to be the next mayor, depending on if they want to run. We've seen in Cranston, Council President Farina ran. We've seen in Central Falls, Council President Rivera ran and became mayor. And our former council president, Sabina Matos, was looking at running. And it was a matter of like when, not if, but then plans changed. Are you planning on running for mayor in 2022?
Well, I'm always considering that. Right now, I'm focusing on doing everything I can to stabilize the city, to stabilize its finances, make safe and secure neighborhoods again, making people feel comfortable wanting to live in the city, raise their family in the city. It's definitely, that I'm considering. As I move along and as the weeks go by, I'll continue to consider it based on, if people think this is the right thing to do. I do believe that I do have a lot to offer. I think Providence needs a steady hand more so now than ever before. I think it needs a little more voice of reason, and it needs a stronger advocate for the entire city. And I mentioned something. Someone said to me the other day, goes, "Oh, are you with this position? Are you going to butt heads with the mayor?" I said, "Listen, I'm not here to butt heads with the mayor. I'm here to advocate for the entire city of Providence. We need to advocate for the city. We need to promote it. We need to shine light on its problems, come up with reasonable, viable solutions, and then also shine lights on its positivity. It's a great, vibrant city full of all the different races and sexes and sexualities and everything. And that's what makes it wonderful, the city. And we need to embrace it, and we also need to magnify it and show why it's important for everybody to support the city of Providence, and why it's important the city grows and prospers, so it can help the city as well as the full state.
Do you see a Mayor Igliozzi administration as the way for that to go?
Well, I mean, if I'm given that opportunity, of course, one of the paths forwards would definitely be, first, we got to get back to the basics. Second, that we have to stabilize our pension system. Third, we need to do everything we can to bring back, and one of the things I want to bring back is a true neighborhood community policing program, where while police officers become embedded in our communities again, walk the streets. There's no greater deterrent to crime than an officer walking the beat, knowing that Mr. Jones is closing up his shop at 5 o'clock or going on vacation next week, or Mrs. Smith is sick on the 3rd floor. You know, one of the biggest hurdles we've had in the past 6, 7, 8 years in particular, I would say past decade, is we need to have officers in the community to have empathy for each other, okay? Empathy is important. That's one of the key words. And when we have officers in community understanding each other, being part of the community, being embedded in the community, knowing how their cultures and the differences, you create empathy, commonality, and then you create additional respect, because everybody wants a safe and secure city in order to raise their family, open up a business, go to school. That's a fact. And one other thing I want to say, I haven't met one person who supports police brutality. No one does, okay? So with that said, that means we need to make sure we have a police department that is diverse, empathetic, embedded, and knowing our community and our neighborhoods. And how do you get to that point? A citywide community policing program. And we have to increase the police force to do that. So we have an officer walking by the schools and selling to the teachers and the kids and the children, going to the playgrounds, right? Knowing the people that they are there to serve and protect. That's how we get there. So that's another initiative that actually has to begin now. But if I'm given the opportunity, I would promote in the future.
That sounded like a soon-to-be policy section for a 2022 mayoral bid. Not trying to gaslight it, but now we're getting to the point where the race is starting to heat up. We're seeing like a potential 5-person race. Representative Hull's going to make that decision in the coming weeks. He had mentioned on in the arena, former Mayor Paolino show. Former Council President Michael Solomon's going to make that official announcement in the coming weeks, and we already have 2 official candidates. We have another candidate who's exploring, and it's good to get your ducks in a row a year out and let people know you're going to run, get your people together, because despite Providence being a small city, it's still big in the sense of a mayoral election where you have to be there a year out. So what time frame could you see yourself making that decision? Are we talking August, September, October, January 2022? When could we see the official announcement of if you're going to run for mayor in 2022 or not?
Well, that's still up. That's up to debate right now. But I can say this at this time, is that, first of all, I think anybody who runs, I think it's great that they're running. But I understand that we all offer different things. For me, what I would offer is a different thing. My offer is about moderation. I don't subscribe to extremism, and I also don't govern to social media. I govern to what the people want. All the people want. Okay? And what I hear when I go to the neighborhoods, and I've been council person for a little while now, is that they want the basic things working again. They want, and these are the unsexy things that people don't like to talk about. Everyone wants to talk about the big picture. Well, let me talk about this. People want to have their garbage picked up, their recyclables picked up. They want their streets clean. They want to have a decent, quiet neighborhood. They want their ball fields and parks to be working for them. They want a fire truck to show up when you need it. They want a police officer to be there. And they want community policing. They want their city government to function for them, and not just function based on a political narrative that's generated through social media. People are looking to wake up in the morning, be able to, once again, wake up, feel safe and secure in their house, enjoy being in their homes, in their backyard, enjoy walking the streets where they are, going to a playground, try to utilize the public school system if they can, and enjoy meeting their neighbors. That's what everybody wants. And guess what? It doesn't matter what race, color, creed you are, what sex, sexuality, or economics you are. Everybody's looking for the same thing, peace and enjoyment. And the problem is that we keep on trying to work on dividing equity based on those things. Doesn't work. You have to work on the idea that everybody's in this together and everybody deserves a fully functioning, well-run city of Providence that benefits the people it serves. Right now, we haven't been doing that very well. We've been a deaf ear to certain issues. We magnify other ones and the ones that people are concerned about. Like right now, lately, this sense of lawlessness in the city of Providence. This is a problem. People need to feel that the city has a handle on this. People need to feel that they can go in their backyard and not worry about their catalytic converter being cut off on their car, or 100 ATVs running up and down their streets and sidewalks. I mean, people need to feel that their cities, has their back. So those are some of the things that I think, and my brand of governing is more towards that. It's the bread and butter, back to the basics, and having the city function for you.
And just before we actually go into one of the issues you had mentioned, which is policing in the city, because just before we move from 2022, it sounds like in that answer that you're not ruling it out, but there's not like a definitive time frame you have to make that announcement if you're going to run for mayor or not. Is that fair to say?
Like I said, we'll know in the near future.
Okay, like October, November, it's going to start to heat up. We're about to be a year out, and it's best to get the campaign a year out. So there's no definitive time frame right now.
I gave my answer. There's no. We'll know soon enough. I leave it at that. Same answer.
Okay, and now moving to policing the city.
Thank you for the question, though.
Yeah, no problem. And it's because your name has been brought up quite a few times as potential candidates in 2022 as being the council president. But now moving to policing, since you had mentioned it a few times when we were talking about 2022, a big issue in cities across the country right now is the push to defund the police. As you had mentioned yesterday, as you had mentioned today, there needs to be like a stronger effort of a community policing. We've seen there was 150 police calls yesterday for a number of terrible crimes that occurred in the city. And just out of curiosity, what is your stance on defunding the police?
Well, I've never supported that. In fact, defunding or abolishing the police is an irresponsible policy. I know we all would hope that we live in a utopian society in which we all can self-police, but we don't. And unfortunately, the human condition, cries out for that. We need to have that buffer. We need to have that type of safety and security now. The issue with the policing is that, I commend the men and women who wear the blue, and all of us condemn the ones that disgrace the blue, right? Like I said earlier, I haven't met anybody who supports police brutality. Nobody does. So that becomes the false narrative, meaning that if you support police, that means you must be pro-police brutality. So that's the false political narrative. The reality is that the city of Providence is a very diverse city. It's a city that needs to have protection from its police force, and the most vulnerable need protection. Right? And as I've been walking through the neighborhoods and meeting all the different constituents across the city, the reality is that people are looking once again for a safe and secure city. And one of the answers is to create a diverse police force. And how do you do that? You have to have a police academy. And how do you get those police officers to be empathetic? You need to bring back neighborhood community policing again. Walking the beat, talking the talk, hanging out on the playground, talking to the store owner, right? Being part of the fabric of the neighborhood. Defunding the police becomes an irresponsible political reaction to, unfortunately, to a very serious issue, right? So when you have an individuals who are bad apples, aren't doing the job, yes, they need to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, that's a fact. So as we move forward, I know the last budget cycle, a majority of the council voted for the budget, and some council members voted against the budget because they wanted to fund the police. Well, the alternative of having no police in the city of Providence, that's that's not a responsible position to be in. That's just a political narrative to promote.
And now shifting the focus a bit to another big issue facing the city, which is our city's public school system. The school system was failing for years and required a state takeover. And there are a lot of sub issues that are clouded over by this main issue. One of those is the expansion of charter schools. But before we talk about that, since the failing school system had been a lingering issue for years, what could have been done differently in terms of fixing Providence's public school system?
Well, now, a couple of things. First of all, Providence school system has, unfortunately, it's taken a good 10 plus years to de-evolve into probably it's the worst school system in Rhode Island, if not New England. First thing. Second, once again, bad policies. It started with 2 administrations ago, where that mayor took away the power of the school board. Right? Didn't like the fact the school board was playing hardball with the teachers' contract and trying to get reform. So the mayor went up to the state house and removed all their powers. And then the school board no longer could negotiate. And that mayor then negotiated, multi-million-dollar pay raise contract for teachers, ran for governor, lost. And then we have the present administration, which had quite a few years opportunity to reform the school department and the police and the teachers contract, and in fact didn't do it. In fact, campaigned on a transformational contract, came up with nothing. In fact, I didn't vote for that contract either because it didn't have any reform. One of the things you have to look at is the teacher's contract, because that's one of the bases. The teacher's contract is based on what they call an industrial-based contract. It's based on automobile workers, meaning how many widgets, how many cars you build. Well, we're not building cars in our schools, are we? We're trying to educate our children and give them a great opportunity for life. Right? So we need to switch that conversation, the contract, from an industrial-based contract to a professional performance-based contract. Okay? Where teachers will get rewarded for their performance, and by the way, will be penalized for not performing. So it needs to turn into more professional based. Second, we need more uniformity in our school systems and our curriculum. Third, we need to be honest. We need to have, they talk about this, we need to have the parents or guardians involved in this child or children's lives. We have to get parents, about 24,000 students, more activated, more involved. The bottom line is, when parents are fully involved and engaged, or guardians, by the way, in their child's education, it benefits that child. We need to get the community more involved. We need to get them more invested. They need to feel like, well, okay, my child's at school, I'm all set. No, they need to say, my child's at school and I'm with them at school. So we need to get the community more involved in that piece. The parents, the guardians have to take a major role in the transformation of the Providence school system. You can't do it with one of the elements, which is just the school system. It has to be the school system, the teachers, the parents, and the children. Okay? All of them have to be part of the complete engagement of transforming the school system. And so what's happened over the years, it's just been like one piece of that puzzle is going to engage. Okay, we'll do some of the teachers' contract. Okay, we'll do some of the buildings. Everybody has to be in the soup. Everybody has to be in that scrum. It's the only way we can create a winning formula. That's what I see. And this other piece of the school system is this. We've also learned data is that in our pre-K and our elementary, our children do okay. They do pretty well. Where we lose our children is middle school. We need to do a massive middle school educational initiative. That's where young people become adolescents, young adults, and that's when the worries of the world or the problems of their family come crashing in on them during middle school, right? They're going through adolescence, they realize now what's going on in the world, and they're going through a lot of changes in their life, physically, mentally. That's where we need to give as much support as we can, educational, supportive, medical, etc., right there. Because it shows when our middle schools are failing, our high schools just continue that failure. That's the reason why prior to the state taking over the school, the high schools except Cross School were at single digits out of 100%, like 1.8% proficiency in math, 1.9 in English in our high schools. That's unbelievable. That's disheartening, right? So we need to do a better job at a middle school, and we need to do a massive middle school reform and engagement piece. So that's the other piece of that puzzle. Now, does it mean it solves it overnight? Unfortunately, it doesn't. Everything I said is it took years for the school department to get into the worst shape, to become the worst school system in New England. It's gonna take years for us to turn it around and make it better. So we need to dedicate ourselves to a true program, set the funding, implement it, and don't waver. Don't let another person come in and change the curriculum. Just stay what we need to do. Stay focused for the next 10 years and turn it around. It's gonna take that long to make it into a better system. It's not gonna happen overnight.
And charter schools also gets brought up into this conversation of improving the education system in Providence. I had mentioned it, the build-ups to this question, and since I had mentioned charter schools, there are more of those in the Democratic Party that are not in favor of charter schools as much as their counterparts are, like the governor, lieutenant governor. Where do you stand on the expansion of charter schools in Providence?
Well, for my neighborhood, I've been very fortunate because I've been able to bring it to my neighborhood. I built 2 brand new schools from scratch. And I also brought in the #1 performing school in New England, Achievement First, to my old building, Oliver Hazard Perry, a charter school. So for my constituents, they have the benefit of both worlds: brand new schools and the #1 performing school in Rhode Island, excuse me, in Providence, in Rhode Island, Achievement First. And they love it. They love having that choice and opportunity. Charter schools create choice for my constituents from all walks of life in all economic backgrounds. But also what it does is it challenges our public school system, right? No one likes to be shown up, do they? Right? So when I hear people talk about, oh, the charter school, well, it's because right now the charter school's formula is working, isn't it? And it embarrasses our public school system, right? So no, it's the public school system. The easy answer is get rid of charter schools so people don't know there's an alternative or there's a better way, right? That's the issue. It's not so much because it's because of jealousy and rivalry. That's why they say don't do charter schools. But in my mind, my constituents deserve opportunity for both types of schools, and they deserve that choice. And I represent I represent a minority majority ward. I have a very diverse neighborhood economically, from middle to lower to extremely poor. I represent the largest public housing and all. So I have a very diverse city economically also. So I have a taste of what the whole city is like, and what they love the fact they have that choice of a great charter school. They love the fact they have a choice of a brand new school, a public school. So choice is good. And at the end of the day, it's not so much, my issue is that we have a duty and obligation to provide a quality education to the children of Providence. However we get there, I support, whether it's just public school, whether it's charter school, or it's a hybrid system of public charter or something else, I support. But the reality right now is the charter schools are performing and providing a quality education to the children in my neighborhood. My public schools are not. So guess what? Public schools, start stepping up, right? Charter schools continue to show the way.
And those same critics of the charter schools also were saying that the state takeover should end right now. How much longer do you think the state takeover should last for?
I think the state takeover should last as long as it takes so the children of Providence get a quality education. Once again, it doesn't matter what elected officials think, or what I think, or teachers think, or administrators think, or politicians think. It matters what the parents in particular, what kind of education these children are receiving, are they getting it? This is all about them. Everybody needs to stop thinking about themselves and stay focused on the children. They deserve a quality education, and they haven't been getting it. And we need to do everything we can to deliver it. That should be everybody's charge. How we get there, once again, Doesn't matter to me. Charter, public, hybrid, both, another alternative. If that child gets a quality education, I support it. I will not disregard anything that can give that child a better education because of bad politics and bad policy.
And since there are a lot of issues facing the city, I don't want to miss the infamous last Rhode Island best known for question. These next few I'm going to do in kind of like a lightning round, like one after another. So I'm going to provide a little bit of context for the first one because I get different answers whenever I ask this. One asking what I'm talking about, or another saying that it's a conservative talking point, which is calling Providence a sanctuary city. Mayor Elorza himself has called Providence a sanctuary city multiple times over the past years, and we were even called a sanctuary state by then Governor Lincoln Chafee a few years back. Do you personally consider Providence a sanctuary city?
I don't even really know what that means, but I can say what we need to promote is Providence is a vibrant city, a healthy city, and a safe city. So we need to get back to the basics first, because right now, until we get at least our sense of lawlessness that's happening in the city of Providence, this city isn't safe for anybody. So we need to turn it around and make it a better place for everybody, all creeds of life, all walks of life, let's say, all nations, all nationalities, all sex, sexualities, and make it safe and secure so people like and love living here.
And the definition I was able to get after getting told what does it mean multiple times is a sanctuary city is defined as a city whose municipal laws tend to protect undocumented immigrants from deportation or prosecution despite federal immigration law. If the Providence is, because Councilman Salvatore had said under that federal definition, we're not a sanctuary city because that's not the case. If Providence were to move policy-wise towards that definition, would you be in favor of or opposed to that?
I don't. You kind of gave a definition, but the reality is that at the end of the day, that becomes this is where we keep on going off the track, right? Where we're getting caught up on a national political issue, right? And meanwhile, back at the farm, we have our crops aren't growing. So, if that helps the city, make it a better city, I'm fine. If it gets our children a better education, I'm fine. But right now, until we solve our pension problem, our safety problem, our school problem, right now I have to focus on the people and the children in the city of Providence. And we need to do everything we can to help them. They are my priority, bottom line.
And this next one is something that the current mayor, Mayor Elorza, has been focusing on, which is making the first steps toward implementing reparations in the city. How that will be done policy-wise is a little bit unclear because right now he's more in like making the first steps and looking at ways that it could be done. Do you personally feel that the next mayor should move forward with those current plans that Mayor Elorza has in place of making the first steps towards reparations?
Well, once again, this is big, massive question. The reality is that the city doesn't have the basic things functioning correctly, and now we're trying to solve these national problems. And this is unfortunately what this administration is doing. As the basic issues aren't happening or basic services aren't being performed in the city of Providence, we get caught up in these national issues. So we don't talk about the real problems we have in the city itself, pension, finances, school system, but we get to talk about these wonderful, let's call these wonderful social media driven conversations. The city of Providence has to pay its own bills first. The city of Providence has a $1.2 billion unfunded pension liability. I don't know how it can stop paying anybody else any more money when it doesn't have enough money to pay its own bills. So it seems to me that becomes a false promise, which creates a false narrative, which creates false hope, and somewhat disingenuous. So whoever's the next mayor of Providence is to focus on getting the city functioning correctly and being able to pay its bills. Just to put in perspective, we received federal dollars last budget, and we used it to pay for $16 million worth of lost revenues. This budget, we received federal dollars, COVID money, $19 million to fill the lost revenue hole. Next year's budget, we're going to use about $25 million. The next mayor of Providence is going to be facing about a $30 million deficit. So where we're going to get all this money is going to be a major challenge for the next mayor of Providence. So I'm a financial guy, and finances dictate what we can and can't do. Would I like to give everybody an automobile and a free dinner every night? Yes, I would. The question is right now is the city can't pay for its own automobile. We need to start focusing on the city a little bit more. I'm going to leave all the national issues and politics to all the folks, to the people that have grander ideas than I do. And I'm going to focus on trying to get the city functioning the way it should, because those grand ideas are great. They're wonderful ideas. But what do you call it? The delegation, the state delegation and the state house and the Congress and the presidents, let them all deal with that because they're able to produce the money. City of Providence just needs to get the basic things working again. So I'm going to focus on that.
And I think you probably answered my last one, which is actually something that was implemented recently, which is the pilot program that's for a guaranteed basic income program for residents that is funded by, as far as my understanding, is like philanthropists like the CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey. Should Providence fully commit to that guaranteed basic income program if it was continued to be funded by philanthropy?
No. Well, it's saying Providence, if someone's going to give me free money to do it, of course I'll take it and do it. But right now, if once that money dries up in, next year, the bottom line is we need to pay our own bills first before I can pay someone else's bills. All right. So once again, that becomes one of those kind of, I get it. It's a wonderful political narrative. It's driven by social media. I get it. Everybody's excited about it. Everybody should have everything. But usually what happens is before I can help you, we've got to have the city help itself. So I think the city needs to get its financial house in order first before it could commit to now paying everybody's income in the future. Because where does the city get its tax dollars from? From your income. So how does that play out? So that's one of those kinds of things where, once again, it's a great national narrative where you take everybody's getting their eye off the ball. You just mentioned 3 issues, which is a national narrative, which takes your eye off the ball of the city's serious problems. And it works because what happens is then the person holding office doesn't have to be accountable for the problems back at home. So it's all great stuff. If someone wants to give me $1 million worth of free money and I disperse them to people, I'm fine with that. I'll take that. But once the money dries up, the city's going to be hard pressed with a multi-million-dollar deficit to start maintaining a program that it cannot afford.
And now shifting away from that lightning round portion to my final question that I asked everyone on the show to take a step away from politics is, in your opinion, what do you think Rhode Island is best known for?
Probably it's oceans, it's tourism, Newport, Providence, Block Island, beaches. We have a lot, by the way, and great state. The beauty of Rhode Island is that you can go from a beach to a mountaintop, not even like 45 minutes. You can go to the woods, you can go to a lake, go to the ocean. You can go to a big city, you can go to a little town. It's just a wonderful state. So I know I gave you an awful lot, but it's known for a lot of things. And I think it's known for this wonderful diversity of having just of being able to do different things, see different things, and be with different people.
You're absolutely right on that. There's a lot of great things our state's known for, and you highlighted some of the best ones, and some of them that I've heard on the show. We are a very small state, and I personally feel if I ended up going to a state like Florida, it might be like a culture shock to not be able to go across a state in like 30 minutes. It's just one of the great luxuries our state has, and the amount of diversity you had mentioned. It's like Rhode Island's like almost like its own country, and it's just a very tight knit community that I highlight frequently, and everybody knows each other. And it's just one of the great things that our state's known for. And, I think what you had touched upon, our wonderful beaches, being able to go from this part of the state to that part of the state quickly is one of the one of the many luxuries that I don't think a lot of states would have. Mr. Council President, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure of mine to have you on.
I had fun. Thank you very much.
And thank you.
I'm sorry, cut you off. Good.
That's okay. And again, thanks for coming on. And I'm glad we were able to make this interview happen. Thank you for watching this episode of Ray-ality TV. If you want to see future episodes as soon as they're posted on this channel, please click the subscribe button down below, along with the post notification bell icon to the right of it. I'm Raymond Bakari, and I'll see you on the next episode.